Welcome back to Raise the Praise, where we choose to reclaim our joy and thrive in every area of our lives. That's physically, mentally, financially, and spiritually, to do all that God is calling us to do with a spirit of excellence. I'm your host, Jennifer Bell. I am a wife, a mom of 3 amazing human beings, a former school administrator, and an ex-dieter turned health and wellness faith influencer. Listen, I want you to know that God is concerned about our health and our well-being. He says so right in His Word, 3 John 2. I also want you to know the definition of health is not just the absence of disease or infirmity. Health is the condition of being sound in our minds, bodies, and our spirit. Listen in each week as we aim to encourage you to live the life you deserve, get your mind, your body, and your spirit in alignment, activate your faith to truly thrive in every area of your life. I'm so glad that you are here. Let's get ready for today's episode. Do you believe God wants you to be the lender and not the borrower? Well, He does. He states it in Deuteronomy 28:12 through 13. God wants us to be the lender and not the borrower. However, we must take responsibility for our finances. And on today's show, Cleo Childress will share exactly how we can do just that. So let me just tell y'all a little bit about Cleo. Cleo Childress is the creator of Cleo Yoga Finance, a podcast host, financial educator, yoga instructor, and transformational speaker. Cleo mixes yoga and finance to help transform mindsets and create healthier financial lifestyles. As a teen mom, she struggled with her finances, homelessness, and a deep depression. However, she persevered, and now she uses her personal and professional life lessons to help others. Her motto is, "Don't wonder what if, take a risk." Well, welcome back. We're talking about financial health with Cleo Childress. Listen, y'all know I talk about being fit for Him physically, mentally, financially, and spiritually, but I haven't talked about that financial pillar before. But let me just tell you something. Recently, I heard Cleo Childress speak on a virtual summit about Money Talks, What Is Yours Saying, right? And I'm telling you what she shared, the stats were eye-opening. And then also she shared some practical steps that are very, very doable for all of us. So before we get started on that, I want to welcome Cleo Childress to Raise the Praise. Welcome, Cleo. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it, and I'm excited to be here.
I love it. So y'all, you've heard her bio, and I'm going to put it in the show notes. But Cleo, tell us a little bit in a nutshell about, how you became Cleo, the yoga finance, a little bit about what your story's about.
Yeah, so I'm Cleo Childress. I'm originally from Nashville, Tennessee, currently live in Dallas, Texas. I am a single mom. My daughter, she is now 17 years old, a senior in high school, and I was a teen mom. That's where a lot of my big transformations really started, and I'm a first-generation college student, so single mom, working, going to college at the same time, and that's when I started to go into a lot of debt with the student loans. Back then, I just didn't really know any better. That's all everyone really talked about in my environment was, if you're going to college, nobody can afford to go, so you have to take out student loans. So I would fill out the FAFSA, accept all these loans. And after that, it was just like a domino effect. It was credit cards, I got car notes, had the payday loans, and then that ended up being, wage garnishments, car repossessions. It just started going downhill because in my family, no one really talked about money. I wasn't taught about money. Unfortunately, I had to learn from the trial and error in my young adult life, but I didn't give up and I didn't quit. I did have that moment where I realized something needs to change. And that moment was when I relocated to Florida. I was in Orlando, Florida at the time working. And that's when I really hit that rock bottom, the lowest point I had ever hit in my life, which I was living in my car, homeless. I had my daughter living with my sister temporarily for about 4 months because I did not want her to experience being in a car. So as I was in the back seat in my Dodge Stratus, parked in Publix parking lot, it was cold. It was the wintertime. It does get cold in Central Florida in the winter. And I would just be crying my eyes out because I just asked myself, I said, Cleo, you are a mother. You know, what type of mother are you to get yourself in this financial position? You know, what type of person, what type of woman are you to get to this point? And I felt terrible. I felt so bad. I felt hopeless. You know, I isolated myself because I didn't want anybody to know that I was homeless. And I didn't know how to ask for help. I had, you know, maybe it was a little bit of pride, embarrassment, shame, guilt, fear, all of that. But what I realized is that I couldn't just sit and dwell in my negativity. I had to do something about it if I really wanted to see change. So I started, you know, when I was homeless, I was taking showers in the gym at the office that I worked at. And I just started practicing yoga and meditation. And that helped me with challenging my mind, my body, and my spirit, because I had to have something else instead of sitting like after work, instead of just sitting crying every night. I was like, this, you have to get it out. It's healthy to get it out. But I said, okay, Cleo, I've cried it out all night, every night for the last several weeks and months. Okay, something else has to happen as well. And that's when I started to use yoga and meditation to help me dig deeper in my finances. You know, it helps me to acknowledge where I was in denial. It helps me acknowledge what my money habits really were and what was really holding me back from the financial lifestyle that I really wanted to live. And that's when I connected yoga and finance. I realized that, hey, it's not just doing a budget or learning, you know, how to track your expenses. You have to dig deeper to figure out, how did you get where you are right now? And what habits really need to change? And you have to dig deep and really challenge your mind and your body. So when you are navigating through this financial journey and you're getting these financial blessings, that you're really able to receive it, manage it, maintain it, and continue to level up. So that self-care piece, having something in place, which was the yoga and meditation for me, helps me in my finances. So that's why I did the Cleo Yoga Finance, because yoga, challenging myself on the yoga mat, helps me challenge myself off the yoga mat and in my financial lifestyle.
Wow. You know, I tried yoga a little bit, actually the PIO method for me, being a little bit older, and I actually really like it. But I want to go back to that debt, because I was one of those too. I was in my particular immediate family, the first one to go to college. And I did have a few scholarships, but not enough to pay for school. And I did that loan too, because you pay for the FAFSA. I never knew there was free money out there. I never knew about a Pell Grant and other things like that. And so I graduated college with a lot of debt, even going into my marriage with a lot of debt. But these are things that we don't know. So let's talk about, you know, I know the Bible says we are to be the lenders and not the borrowers, but so many times in our families, and if you want something and you don't have the money, you go get a credit card, or you get a payday loan, or you get those types of things. So when you find yourself spiraling in that debt, what do you call it? Dump, if you will, it's hard to get out. It's like you pay a little bit, and then it's like that sand and the water analogy. Every time you build out, the water comes in and you get in deeper, right? So how did you first realize that, okay, I heard you say you got to the point, something has to change. And then what did you do? What's the first thing that you did, though? Tell us, how did you, first of all, you said get out of denial. That's one thing. Let's just be honest, right? After you realize that I have to do something different in order to be good for my daughter and not have her fall in that same cycle. So what did you actually do?
Yeah, so I started with educating myself. So I used to hate reading books. I'm more of a math numbers person. I didn't like to read books at all. But when I started to work on myself, I said, okay, there's knowledge in these books. So let me start finding some financial books I can read. You know, I started reading the Dave Ramsey book. I even bought Patrice Washington's book. When her first book, I bought hers. And I just started to read, you know, and in the beginning, it was a lot to process. So I was just kind of reading, taking it all in. I read books. That's when I started watching YouTube videos of other financial professionals out there. And then I started to actually go on social media and have conversations with other people just about money, not necessarily financial experts, but just other people, everyday people who are in their own journeys and maybe struggling with something, and we can kind of talk back and forth, because I used to isolate myself and not talk to anybody about anything about money. But what I realized is that it's not just self-educating yourself. You really have to start talking with other people so people can know about you, what you're trying to work on, because they can help you in some type of way. So I started, the first thing was reading books, watching videos on YouTube, and communicating with other people on social media that were talking about money too.
Because that lets you know that, look, you're not alone. And that's something that the enemy wants to do. If he can isolate us and get us to think that, see, she's over there, she's doing really well. You don't want anybody to know that you're really not doing well. So keep up this facade. And that facade is what keeps us really in the dumps and depressed about our money situation and not taking financial responsibility for where we are. So when you move towards your taking responsibility for your financial situation, because I believe we get ourselves into things. Nobody makes us do anything, right? So when did you say, okay, I've talked to people, I realize I'm not alone. Then what was your next step?
Yeah, so the next step is I actually had to start taking action. You know, it was enough of taking in all this information, because you don't want to be an information hoarder. You don't want to just read all these books and take all these notes and let them just sit there and collect dust. I realized I had to actually start doing something. So the first thing I did was I started looking at my credit reports. Like, I knew how much debt I had, but I never really looked at my credit reports because, for one, I was like, I just don't want to look at the mess.
Yeah.
I don't want to see it. But then second, I knew I wasn't borrowing any more money because I knew I wouldn't get approved anyway. So I was like, why do I need to check my credit reports? I'm not going to be financing anything because I can't get approved because my credit score and my credit history was just terrible. So I started looking at my credit report to see, okay, what is actually on here? You know, there were debts on there that, you know, majority of it was mine, but there were some errors on there that wasn't mine, or that was reporting inaccurately. That's something that can drive your score down too, is that the credit bureaus are only putting information on it that they get from other companies. And sometimes they report things wrong. So I started with acknowledging, okay, what's actually mine. I made a list of all my debts from smallest to largest, you know, who the creditor was. And a lot of my debts were old. So they had been charged off, sold to other credit companies. So I had to do a lot of research to figure out who is actually collecting on this debt now because it's so old. So I had a lot of work to do going through my credit reports because I had so much debt. It was like pages and pages and pages. So that was the first thing, analyzing my credit report. Then I also looked up check systems, which is a database that basically like a credit report, but it's about like bank accounts that you used to have. So I had a lot of bank accounts over the years that were charged off because it was overdrafted. And I didn't want to have that negative, not just the negative credit history, but I didn't want a negative reports out there with my banking system. So I had to follow up with banks that had charged off balances that were in the negative, and I had to do my own little list on those, all these banks that I owed. And then I started to budget. I actually started creating a budget with pen and paper. At the time, I wasn't thinking about spreadsheets and apps and none of that. I just got my pen and my paper, and I started writing down my necessities first, like my bills, my rent, utilities, things like that. And I started to find ways that I could cut back. And I started to also figure out ways, how can I make some more money? Because it's one thing to cut back, but okay, how can I make some more money too? And at that time, I only had one stream of income, and I realized one stream is not going to work long term. So I knew I had to make some changes, but start where I was and not feel like I had to do 100 things at one time.
I heard you mention you read Dave Ramsey's book. My husband and I, we've done that, Financial Peace, and it really works as a starting point. And then also we're able to kind of facilitate some of the classes. And it's really good. So what would you tell someone, say, for instance, they're listening and they know they're in that quiet closet. They don't want anybody to know that, but they really want to walk into 2021 in a better place, at least having a plan to get out of financial debt. I mean, to the point where if their husbands really knew, they would be, you know, because sometimes, I'm just going to be honest, Wives don't, they keep things away, and then all of a sudden it's really affecting the family overall. So what would you say for us to do? How can you help us, or in those actual practical steps? Yes, I know a budget, but I don't understand budget. I need to figure out a way, all this debt that I have, where do I start? Do I start with the largest debt? Do I start with the smallest debt? Things like that.
Yeah. So you really want to first make that list of all your debts. And sometimes you'll have debts that may not necessarily be reporting on your credit report. So you have to make sure you're looking through all your financial documents. Look at your tax returns, your emails, paper documents that you have, because you want to make sure you're accounting for any and everybody that you owe. It's like you really won't be delivered with this debt-free journey until you put everybody on there. Even if you have a cousin that you owe money to, put them on the list as well. And you want to start with that first debt, the lowest debt first, because a lot of times we look at the mountain of debt and we think like, oh my God, I have 20 debts on this list and it's over $100,000. But no, make the list so you're aware of everything that you have, but just focus on that first debt and get that out of the way first. For example, when I made my first debt list, the one at the bottom of the list, the one that was the smallest, was $50 from Blockbuster. And I was so upset that they put that on my credit report, because this was when Blockbuster had already shut down, the stores were closed, but I guess on their end, they were collecting on all of these late fees and things like that they had. So I said, they're just trying to get all these last few dollars from people. But I said, you know what? Let me just pay the $50, get it off of my credit report, get it updated. But that made me feel good, because I said, wow, I paid off one of my debts. Like, it really does give you this energy, this energized feeling that I can do this. Now I can move on to my next debt. Now my next debt was around $350. Yeah, it's gonna keep going up, but you have that momentum that you're starting to build for yourself, that you know what, I can do this. Even if your smallest debt isn't 50, maybe it's more, but you have to start with one debt at a time, and then you'll be surprised how things will start to happen in your journey. You may be blessed in a way where you can pay off 3 debts at a time. You know, you never know. So just start with that smallest debt first and work your way up that debt list.
So if you have, like, for instance, credit card debt, and one is $5,000, another one is $20,000.
Yes.
Chip away at the $5,000 the most you can, but you still have to pay what would you suggest the minimum of the larger debt?
Yes. So you still want to pay the minimum amount, especially if there are credit cards that are still open and active. Now, if there are cards that are like closed and charged off and really aren't increasing because the debt is just sitting there. Sometimes when some credit cards are closed and charged off, it's just sitting there at the same amount. And maybe whatever collection company is collecting on it, they may add a late fee not a late fee, just a collection fee onto it. But if it's an open card, it's active, open, yes, keep paying the minimum payment, but put more money towards the lower balance one that you're trying to pay off.
Oh, that's really good. That's so good. All right. You talked about those action plans, making sure you write everything down. And then when you talk about a budget, is there a simple way, just simply put your budget? How do I do that? If I've never made a budget before, I just get my paycheck and I pay off what I can, and then I go spend whatever. I'm not used to a budget. How can you help someone in the most simplest terms?
Yeah, so what I encourage people to do in that position, if you're brand new to budgeting, I encourage you to track your expenses and income first. So just create a list. It could be with pen and paper, a Word or Google document. If you like spreadsheets, use that, whatever is most user-friendly for you. And just first list all of your income, all the income you get from anywhere, whether from your job, maybe you have some government benefits, maybe you can receive child support, alimony, whatever money that you receive each month, make a list of that and total it up. Then over the next 30 days, just track your spending. Just spend like you normally would, so you can really get an idea of what you're really spending your money on. Every time you spend money, I don't care if it's change or you use your debit card or if you're using your credit card, whatever you're spending money on, I need you to list who you spend it with. So let's say you went to Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A, I spent $8.26 on, January the 3rd. And I know it can be time consuming. It's not always fun, but it's really going to help you get an idea of where you're really spending your money. Because yes, we remember some things, but once you start tracking it by actually listing it, each transaction, and you're looking at the numbers, and once you're finished tracking over the 30 days and you add it up, you start to realize, oh my goodness, I think I really am kind of spending a little too much in this area. So maybe I need to scale back a little bit temporarily so I can allow more money to go elsewhere. But tracking your expenses first is a really good way to get an idea of where your money is going. Mm-hmm. So you know, do I need to decrease some of my expenses, or do I need to increase my income, or do I need to do a little bit of both? Yeah. And that's when you're starting to budget. That's going to help you create the budget and follow it more when you really understand what is really going on in your finances.
So I really need to understand where you are and not just leave it up for chance that, okay, well, I know I get this much, and if I have this much left over, I'm doing okay. That was very, very insightful and good information. I'm asking these questions for other reasons too. It's helping me. It really, really is. So as we get ready to wrap up, so much practical tips that you shared even on, the broadcast today. First of all, I'm going to ask you a question that I ask all my guests at the end. But before we close, how can people connect with you? Yes, I'm going to have all your information in the show notes, but what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Yes, the best way is on my website at cleoyogafinance.com. And also I'm on social media at Cleo Yoga Finance. That's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and I'm on LinkedIn too at Cleo Childress.
All right. Awesome. Well, I'm sure some of my audience is going to be tapping on your door a little bit. I know I did with those financial cards, but that's on another time. All right. So I love to end with this because my tagline is to choose joy. Even in your finances, no matter what you're going through, we have a choice. And I always say choose joy because it is a choice. So as we close, Cleo, tell me, if you can, in a sentence or word, what brings you joy?
What brings me joy is knowing that I'm doing my best every single day. I used to really be really critical of myself and hard on myself if I didn't get this done or that done. But now I've just learned, just do your best every day, and I can sleep peaceful at night knowing that, hey, I may not have been perfect. I may not have accomplished everything on my to-do list, but I know I did the best that I could with what I had, and that's all that matters.
I love that. Give ourselves grace so that we can experience that joy. Thank you so much, Cleo, for being on Raise the Praise podcast. And I cannot wait to get to know you a little bit more and see how this is going to bless. I know it's going to bless so many people when we get our finances right and get in balance with everything that God has for us. We can live that life that God has promised us. So thank you so much for being on the show today. Hey friends, thanks so much for sharing your time with me today. Real quick, before you go, if you found value in today's podcast and something resonated with you, would you leave me a 5-star review and subscribe on iTunes? I am thanking you in advance, and I look forward to reading each and every one of your reviews. You can find me at raisethepraisepodcast.com or join my Facebook group, Choose to Praise. Until next time, remember to choose joy and raise the praise in every area of your life.